All right. Hello, everyone. I am freezing cold right now. All right, Stephanie.
I'm here.
Beautiful.
I was just turning on YouTube, and Josh, you said you're freezing. You should actually try getting inside today. It's really nice.
Yeah, I turned off my air conditioning, and I don't know why I'm still freezing. I turned it off like hours ago. So the basement life.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Josh and I, well, Josh is actually in Toronto. I'm about an hour outside of Toronto. So fall weather within the last couple of days is in full swing now. So I actually had to turn my furnace on the other day, and I was fighting it. I didn't want to do it. I was like, no, I'm not turning my heat on.
The furnace is literally right behind this door.
But if you weren't in the basement, you would actually be getting a lot of sunshine coming in right now. So it's really nice. So if you can get some vitamin D today, you probably should do it.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. But thanks everyone for joining us today. We actually have a small group of people joining us today, which is actually fine. Because then we can maybe do a little, maybe tailor it more to, what you guys are looking to use within Reply. So today's session, we're really going to focus on our native integrations and really just, how to set up your integration and really how to get the best out of that automation. So we do have native integrations with Salesforce, Hubspot, and those are both two-way syncs, which is nice. We also have native integrations with Copper, Zendesk Sell, and Pipedrive. And Rachel, you had mentioned that you guys are switching over to a new CRM and you want to utilize Zapier with Reply, which we connect over 2,000 different apps via Zapier as well. So hopefully there's a bit of something for everyone here today. And as always, if you guys have any questions, we'll definitely get to them throughout this session. You can either leave them in the Q&A or in the chat. I'm going to man those, keep an eye on those, make sure we get to all of them. And Josh is our integration specialist. I don't know if you've all had the pleasure of meeting him. He's going to be taking it away today and really diving in to those integrations. So Josh, it's all yours.
All right, beautiful. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I will share my screen. Can you see everything?
Yes.
All right, beautiful. So we have done these integration calls in the past. We are going to be expanding some of our offerings in the near future, but let's start with some of the one-way syncs for now, just because they're a little bit easier to go through. And if you guys do have any specific questions about how any of these work, including Zapier, let me know and I can get to them a little bit later. So to begin, we'll cover the Close, Pipedrive, and Zendesk Sell integrations. They all work primarily the same way. They work on a toggle-based system. So essentially, you will connect as you would log in any other CRM. And you have three options here. You can create people from persons, you can update people from persons, and you can push people directly into a sequence. By default, if nothing is toggled on, obviously nothing will actually work. But what this is doing is looking at whatever your contact or lead equivalent is on Close, Pipedrive, or Zendesk, and then making copies directly into Reply based on whatever information you have on the CRM side. Within the mappings section of all three of these different integrations, you will actually be able to choose the specific information that's carried over from one platform to another. So by default, you will need to map email and first name. You don't actually have to use the full name if you don't want to. And then everything else is going to be based on what you need to include in your particular sequences or one-off emails. Pipedrive can use custom fields, but Close and Zendesk cannot at this time. But all of them are going to be looked at in the future to be expanded to be more in line with our bidirectional sequences, integrations that I'm going to cover in a moment. But yeah, relatively straightforward. You simply map what you need. In the case of Pipedrive, if you want to move people from Pipedrive directly into a particular sequence, there are these object types called deals and stages. And what you would want to do is you would want to name a stage the exact equivalent of whatever your sequence is called. And when you move a deal to that particular stage, it will automatically be transferred to the sequence of the same name. In things like Close or Zendesk, it's all based on statuses. So you would have to create a custom status with the exact same name of the sequence you're trying to work with. And then it will also transfer those people into the sequence of the same name. So yeah, relatively straightforward. There's not too much kind of flexibility with these options. They're more designed to simply get the information from one location into ours. And then that's where the versatility comes into play.
And one thing about the Pipedrive integration, Josh, before you kind of move on, our team is currently working on updates to our Pipedrive integration. So that's something that I just want to let you guys know. We don't have an exact ETA of when that is going to be released, but they are working on it, and it should be a bi-directional sync, just like our Salesforce and Hubspot integrations.
Yeah, so I'm going to move into HubSpot right now, and the Pipedrive will look remarkably similar to what I'm about to show you here. So it's a much more kind of streamlined experience and allows for a lot more kind of flexibility and customization in what you want the sequences and the integrations to actually accomplish. So you'll have a number of sync steps that you can kind of play around with, and you can add different step types. And these are the kind of interactions that we currently offer. So people statuses, that's the things like if they've replied, if they've bounced, if they've opted out. You want the equivalent on your HubSpot, Pipedrive, or Salesforce entity. We can move that over. We've recently implemented the option to relay call information if you're using our direct call functionality, as well as any other supplementary tasks. So if you're embedding LinkedIn connection requests, sending SMSs, things like that, you can have those carried over as tasks to keep all of that activity history in your actual contact records. Primarily what you'll want to be using this for is transferring people from one platform to the other. So you'll have options like people in reply to contacts in HubSpot. If you click into this entity here, you will be able to, again, go through all of the mappings as exactly the same way as you would in the original Pipedrive that I just showed you. This is going to give you the option to use custom fields. So if you do have a field that you think is necessary, but reply doesn't kind of natively allow you to map that, you can create custom options and then map that to whatever you'd like. There's no limit to the amount of information here. Typically, people will ask what's best practice as far as these mappings go. And it does ultimately come down to whatever you're actively using. Some people like to map every single piece of information just so they have as comprehensive a history as possible. Personally, I like to only bring in the information that I'm actually going to use as a variable or I'm using for segmentation. So you can use things like country if you're trying to segment your list based on location. You can use industry if you're trying to set up different sequences for different segments based on that, trying to cater to specific markets, tailor your sequences and content to better match who you're reaching out to. What HubSpot does that Salesforce and the other options do not currently is the ability to map ownership. So this is more for team settings. If you have a number of team members on your account and you want to have one central hub for your integration, you can actually map the ownership from reply and make sure it's matching up correctly to the integration. So you're not getting any duplicate records. You're not getting any mixing and matching of the contacts pool, just so everybody has who they're supposed to be reaching out to and there's no kind of crossover or cross-contamination there.
So Josh, quick question. When you're talking about ownership, you had mentioned team accounts, and this is a question I find that I get a lot from our customers who are using the HubSpot integration. If you have it set up like this, do you still need to go into each user on the account and set up like a specific HubSpot instance like you're doing right here?
So this is only from reply into HubSpot. There is currently no way to do it the other way around, HubSpot into reply. Right. So this is essentially what your question refers to, this other step type. So you would have it the opposite. You would have contacts in HubSpot to people in reply. And if I click into it, it shouldn't give me the option to have ownership. Like that whole section's completely gone here. So you would need to have an individual instance of your integration. This is also going for Salesforce. You would need to have a separate integration in each user account with a filter rule that's only pulling in people for, just using the examples that I had on screen earlier, Ada, for instance, is connected to the Ada account, Chris is connected to Chris, so on and so forth. This is more so where if you're only setting it up and you're using reply as your kind of base of operations, all of your updates are happening on a reply side, and you want those relayed into HubSpot. Based on the ownership column on the replies people page, you'll be able to move that information directly into the appropriate owner on HubSpot.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And good segue here, we have the filter rules. So this is really where all of the complexity comes into play. If you leave it completely blank, and again, this is applicable for Copper, Pipedrive, Salesforce, everything that we have. If you are not including a filter rule, it will try and pull in every single person in your respective CRM. If you're only looking to pull in a specific subset of people, you want to have a filter rule that is going to look up that particular information. So again, we're talking about segmentation here. If you have a particular city that you have a sequence set up for, you're going to want to look for that exact city. And then this step will only pull in people that meet that exact criteria. You can have as many filter rules within this particular step as you'd like. The only limitation is that you don't want to have conflicting fields. So for instance, it's highly unlikely that someone is in multiple cities. So you can't have city equals Toronto and city equals Mississauga. I'm from Canada. So they're both conflicting. It would show up with nothing and the steps simply wouldn't work. So when you're doing these, just make sure that your sequences and your steps don't have any conflicting information. That way we'll be able to accurately pull in the proper list. It is an and logic. It is not or at this time. And with those filter rules, you can actually have as many instances of this particular step as you'd like. So if you want to pull in like 5 different subgroups, you would simply duplicate the step 4 other times, and then you can change the filter rule for all of those different versions. So you're pulling in multiple groups at once. Once you've figured out what you want to do with your filter steps, you can add an action. So this is where you're going to be able to move people directly into a sequence automatically. So again, if you have that city sequence set up and you have the exact list being pulled in from HubSpot, you can add an action, instantly move them to your Toronto sequence, and it'll automatically place them in there as soon as the integration is triggered. And you can only have 1 action per step at this moment. So again, any number of steps, just 1 sequence per step. This toggle here, only for new records, you will notice this whenever you're adding an action. This refers to when they're added to the system for the first time. So most of the time, in most use cases, I would recommend just turning that off. So any updates will trigger the integrations and move people more accurately. But if you are being very precise and very clean with what you're bringing into reply, this is an option for you if you need it. And then we are moving on to the people statuses. So very similarly to the contacts or leads is the people statuses. So again, the types of interactions that you see coming in for your sequences, you can have that information relayed over to your HubSpot, Salesforce accounts. You can use custom fields here. There's no limitation. Pretty much whatever you need to most accurately represent the type of reply status, you want to map over there. There are a few additional options: auto replies, bounce, clicked. Meeting booked is a new one that we've spoken about a couple of weeks back. But again, pretty much any type of interaction that you have in the sequence, we will be able to map that type of information over. And then the same thing goes with the filter rules. These are based off of the filters that we have set up in Reply. So on the main people page, there's an add filter option. Whatever you save there will be able to be loaded from this drop-down menu. And again, just want to avoid any conflicting pieces of information, conflicting properties to get the most accurate results. This particular example was looking for a certain level of interaction, and they were sending this information over to HubSpot so that they can pull up those lists and maybe have a call, like they have their dialer ready to go and they can hit these people up, following up on different verticals to increase the likelihood of the further engagement. This is very similar to the only for new records toggle that I was mentioning. For statuses in particular, I don't think this is super relevant because if the first sequence or the first status that you get through is opened before replied, that's probably not going to do much good for you. So I don't recommend having this turned on, again, unless you're having a very specific corner case. And then inbox categories is almost identical to people statuses. The difference being where a status is how they've interacted in general, the inbox category is specifically for responses and is based on the context of those responses. So if they respond to you saying, stop emailing me, they'll probably be placed in the do not contact folder, which is the equivalent of opting out. And you can have that mapped over in HubSpot just so that you're aware of that and don't add them into any new sequences moving forward. The log is just going to show you what's been working and if there are any errors that occur, just to let you know how accurately the system is pushing or pulling any of your contacts. So if you are kind of wondering why things are going a bit slowly or working flawlessly, you just come in here to check out any progress. In general, I should have mentioned this a little bit earlier, but in general, all of these integrations work automatically every few hours. So if you're turning it on and nothing's happening immediately, you do have the option to hit the sync now button. But if you do just leave it turned on, just turn this toggle up in the corner, it will eventually start syncing based on the order of your steps every 2 to 3 hours. And that's another good point to bring up. The order in which you see these steps, and again, this is applicable for Copper and for Salesforce, the order in which you see these steps is the order in which the system is going to run the sync. So if I have 2 steps here, let's go people to contacts, and I move it up here. So if I have it in this exact order, contacts in HubSpot to people in reply back to contacts in HubSpot, the sync is going to pull all of the information from HubSpot into reply, and then it is going to see all of the information that we just pulled in and mirror that back into HubSpot. So if you're making manual updates to your people on the reply side using this exact setup, none of that information will actually be relayed over, because when the sync occurs, it's going to look at HubSpot first, overwrite whatever information that you had in reply, and then mirror that over. So you do want to make sure that whichever step you have first in this order is the system that you are primarily using for all of your updates. So if HubSpot's first in line, you want to make sure that you're primarily using that to update all of your contact or lead information. Likewise, you can simply switch the order. So whichever you prefer, but do keep in mind that it does sync in that order. And I've had many a question regarding why specific information keeps getting deleted. As for some of the other options here, primarily we have Zapier as the only major integration that we haven't covered. And that is going to be based on a very specific use case. So let me just click into a random sequence here. So essentially, by adding in a Zapier step, you're adding in a higher level of trigger. On the kind of surface, Zapier is a bridging tool that will allow you to accomplish everything that I went over in the integrations, but with a much larger scale of tools. The filter options are usually very similar. The custom field options are also very similar, as well as the ability to transfer contacts directly into sequences. It is going to be slightly different, however, based on what the third-party tools have at their disposal. For reply in particular, we do have a number of set options. Let me show you here. It works on a very similar logic to our in-house triggers. So you'll be able to use a lot of these same options from this dropdown in your Zapier when you're trying to run those types of integrations. We currently do not support the call logs on Zapier, but that is also being worked on. So Rachel, I know that you were talking about Crelate in particular. Was there a specific type of Zap that you had in mind? Maybe I can kind of show you how that works here. Or just in general, were you kind of wondering what they did? And if anybody else has any questions as well. This is all broad strokes, so if there's a particular thing that you want to know about your integration, feel free to let us know and we can kind of go into more detail.
Yeah, because a lot of times, I mean, depending on your specific workflow, there may need to be some, like, you know, certain filtering rules that we can kind of get into. So yeah, it really just depends on how you want that integration to be set up, as well as what you're hoping to get in terms of the information that's syncing back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do have a question here. Can we create deals from positively responded leads for HubSpot? And absolutely. So I can actually show you how to set that up right now. Again, using those filter options that I've been mentioning, we can go back into configure. And so you would want to work with the people in reply to contacts in HubSpot. Click into that. We would want to go down to filter rules, and then you can set up a filter rule for interested. So this particular one, you're going to want to look for inbox category equals interested. So that means if they respond to you, our dynamic kind of sorting algorithm will see the context, determine that they are interested in whatever it is that you're offering. And then as long as you have this particular filter saved, we will move all of the people that are marked interested as a contact in your HubSpot. If you're looking for specifically the deal object, currently we only work with contacts. No other custom objects are available, but that is something that the team has heard loud and clear and is planning for a future release. No ETAs, but for now, specifically contacts.
So Josh, we have a question from Martin. He's asking if we can see an example with the Zapier step.
Sure. So Zapier, again, is very specific for every single tool that you're trying to work with. And you do need to have a Zapier account. Showing it in a step may not show you, give you the full kind of understanding, but let me try to walk you through it. So here we have our first crowd pass, step one. This email will go out and then we will set up a Zapier for number two. You need to create the Zapier on the Zapier side first, and it will essentially act as your trigger point. So for example, if email one is viewed 3 or more times, trigger Zapier 1, and then move to the next step immediately, which will set them up for whether it be a LinkedIn call, an SMS, or a continued email sequence. This is just a way to place the specific trigger in Zapier directly into your sequence so that it's timed more correctly than if you were to have just a general zap on the Zapier side. I apologize that it's a little bit confusing because Zapier is custom for every single tool. I can't actually show it to you. But if I stop sharing, I can bring up generally the Zapier screen, and maybe that'll give you guys a better understanding.
Well, I actually pulled up Zapier on my end
Okay.
because I was just looking for some of the Zapier options with Correlate and reply.io for Rachel. So I can just share my screen, Josh, if you want.
Yeah, that'll work.
There we go.
Perfect. So yeah, so essentially Zapier works with, you will choose the initial app similar to how we have to order the sync steps. You will choose the initial app, and then the secondary one is whatever your trigger is going to provide the action for. And then the particular options are going to be unique for whichever tool you're working with. So in this particular example, this is Correlate. These are the options that they have available. So whenever you create a new company, whenever you create a new contact, you will then choose a corresponding action for reply. So again, you can mark them as finished if you don't want to give them any more follow-up emails. You can move them to a brand new sequence. You can change the fields in the actual contact profiles. Our actions will always remain the same, regardless of which third-party item you're using or trying to connect to. It's usually the triggers that vary from app to app. Some are going to be incredibly expansive. Others are going to be quite limited. So you are going to have to kind of shop around your options to try to figure out exactly what you need. That's always the toughest things with these types of calls. We do our best to answer as many questions, but because there's so many specific use cases, it can be a little bit difficult and ambiguous without a very specific kind of request in mind.
So Josh, do you want to maybe quickly go through the Salesforce integration? I know that it's very similar to HubSpot, almost identical to HubSpot. I think there's just a couple small differences there, right?
Yeah, let me pull that up. Give me one moment. So you got to vamp for me for like 10 seconds.
I have to what?
Vamp. It's what we call filling in dead air in the business.
Ah, okay. All right.
It's all right. I have it up here.
Apparently I'm out of the loop on that one. So
it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, we have multiple different test accounts for the different integration types. Mm-hmm. So it's lots of bouncing around. Load. Okay, there we go. There we go. So in Salesforce, the primary difference here, as you can see, it's largely the same. And when you click into each of these different steps, it is going to be primarily the exact same setup. The main difference is that we do have a plugin for Salesforce. So what this allows you to do that HubSpot or Pipedrive or Zendesk doesn't allow you to do is it gives you a more kind of manual approach and a curated approach to who you're bringing in. So what the plugin does, and just clicking on it, will just check to see if it's installed or not. And you can download it in our settings page. What it does is it applies specific buttons on the Salesforce side that will allow you to move individual contacts directly into your reply account, move them to different sequences. You can pull up lists and move them en masse, but it just gives you a much more kind of hands-on approach to who exactly you're bringing in. So if you feel like you don't know the exact filters or your custom fields are changing from sales rep to sales rep, this will allow them to more accurately pull and push people into reply whenever they need it. It is instant when you use the plugin, as opposed to the more automated every couple of hours options that the native integrations do. So the plugin is going to be very useful if you are living in Salesforce and really kind of curating your sequences on the day-to-day, moving people around and whatnot. We also have two different profiles here. So the custom profile is predominantly going to be the one that's used in most instances. It's the option that allows you to fully customize each of your steps, continue adding new ones, as well as add the actions to any of the leads or contacts options as well. What the default profile will do is if you're very new to API automation, it will give you just a number of kind of basic options that you can mess around with to a certain degree, but there are no actions that you can add. It's much more limited so that you're not overwhelmed with choice, which I understand can be a thing when you're looking at all these different steps and wondering specifically what's going on. We also have the ability to carry over all of your email threads. So as you're sending emails back and forth, that conversation history is going to be mapped over. We can't choose the actual location. It's always going to be in the tasks tab underneath the particular lead or contact. But all of the email conversation will be relayed automatically. So no need for a BCC or any other external email tracking options there. But yeah, it's relatively straightforward. We try to make it as streamlined as possible for you guys. One of these days, all of the integrations will be exactly the same, but just to kind of summarize, Salesforce and HubSpot are the both bi-directional and most robust integration offerings that we have at the moment. Salesforce has the kind of leg up with the inclusion of the plugin, which is free. Where Copper is very similar visually to Salesforce and HubSpot, but is only one way. Then
I just want to note one thing really quickly. So even though Salesforce and HubSpot are the only bi-directional integrations, Close, Pipedrive, Zendesk, and Copper, there are some more bi-directional options via Zapier as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind too.
Exactly. Zapier is its own kind of product, and there are limitations if you're using a free account there. So what you can do to save on Zap space is connect the pulling in of information through our native integrations here, and then use Zapier to automate the relaying of that information back. So in conjunction, you can get a similar experience to Salesforce and HubSpot. But again, natively, Close, Pipedrive, Zendesk, and Copper are all one way. We are pulling the information from them into Reply. We cannot push the information back. And Pipedrive is the one that is next in line for the upgrade to look like Salesforce and HubSpot. Right, were there any other specific questions? I understand it's not super detailed, but if there are any specific use cases you guys want me to run through, I'd absolutely be happy to.
I had another point about the integrations and it totally slipped my mind.
Yeah.
Totally forgot. I'm sure I'll remember in a couple minutes and I'll cut you off and when I remember.
As soon as we decide to wrap things up, we'll remember everything that we need to talk about. But yeah, it's if you guys have any questions here or moving forward, you can email us. You can use our live chat and we'd be happy to discuss things further. But yeah, if there are no questions, we can give you guys your day back. These are typically shorter calls in comparison to our content or setup webinars. So thank you all for coming, and yeah, we'll be here when you need us.